Hello, welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm doing my 15.2 ADC tier list. So if you have content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were a couple of changes this patch. We saw a buff towards Unitowers, we saw a buff towards Mortal Reminder and LDR. We also saw some adjustments to the likes of Smolder. Well, strictly buffs actually. Smolder received a buff towards his Q, enabling IE to have a modifier on it, which is a pretty big change. It does make it a bit more mandatory to purchase the item on him. The other champions which got nerfed were like fringe bot lane picks for like sort of Victor and Cassiopeia got slightly tagged. Cassiopeia, the change didn't really do that much. They are tagging her again in 15.3. Victor did lose some power. That was a decent chunk of power budget or percentage win rate. There are like various ways and metrics of that Riot kind of go through to like make sure that champions are in the correct spot, but he did lose something. And yeah, let's get into it. So the D tier is going to consist of the same three champions. We have Smolder, who is probably at the top of the D tier now. He still struggles. Like the IE change was nice. It enables it be as like a solid second item. It's now pretty comparable with the likes of Shojin. Shojin still has a terrible build path. Like the real value of Shojin is when you get the full item online. Like if you can get it early, it's a very effective option and enables him to stack faster as well. Other than that though, IE is just going to be the better raw damage option and has the better build path. Like it just allows you to itemize a lot more damage, and the crit is nice as your Q has a crit ratio on it. Other than that though, you can still opt into like IE or Shojin as like a third, second slot option, and then you're looking at like your BTs later on down the line. The champion's still struggling. It's still not enough to really push him up in the bot lane role, but he sits as like a high D tier option. You could basically consider him a C tier if you are very comfortable with the champion. If you're like even more comfortable, then yeah, he will climb the tier list. Other than that though, Tristana and Samira are my two other picks within the D tier. Tristana doesn't really benefit from the Unitower changes. However, it does look like she can opt into the item now. It is a comparative option to Collector. Collector is still her most commonly rushed first item, but Unitowers does look like an option. So if you do want like an attack speed oriented Tristana build, definitely something you can opt into. If you want the raw damage, then Collector is still going to be your core first item purchase. IE still looks really good on Tristana, and LDR, Mortal Reminder, still is going to be like your third, fourth item opt-in when you need the damage to get through front lines traditionally. Samira is the weakest ADC in the game. Samira has the biggest problem of having zero build flexibility. She might be one of, if not just outright, the least flexible build champion in the game. You are almost always building the same 5 items no matter what. That is Collector, IE, Shilbo, BT, and LDR. There's basically zero alternating like options there. Maybe you opt into a Hubris if you're really aggressively snowballing early, but even then, Collector is still like 98% of the time being purchased as her first option. That also being said, she is just weak. She is being buffed in 15.3. Hopefully that will bring some life to her. I don't think it is enough though. It's 2-second duration on her E attack speed. It helps for sieging a bit, and it can enable her to just output a bit more DPS within a fight, but Samira tends to be a bit more built around her fast combos and her burst. If she can execute it slightly faster, that is nice, but probably not going to be enough, probably needs more, and might get buffed again in 15.4. Moving on to the C tier then, we have Aphelios, who I believe is very comparable between his first 3 items, and that is Collector, Unitowers, and Youmuu's. Youmuu's obviously has always been a pretty solid option on him. Before it got nerfed for range, it was just outright his best item. With the range modifier on it now, it does look like Collector first is still going to be what you're traditionally playing, but if you're opting into an attack speed build, kind of akin to Tristana, then you can go the Unitowers. He is a harder to pilot marksman. If you're comfortable on him, you're going to play him. If you're not, he's just a pick I'd recommend avoiding at the moment. Kaiser didn't benefit from the buffs this patch. He is definitely towards the bottom of the C tier. The champion still has the core, like your static or your Kraken into your Ginsu Nasha variant, and then like you can go like AP or some AD options later on, or just picking up like a Zonya. But there are different ways like the 4-5 item slots can go, but she's definitely a bit weaker at the moment. You don't really see many AP artillery Kaisers. It got a bit hit when they nerfed the W again, and yeah, she sits towards the lower end of the C tier. Lucian is fine. Like, once again, if you can pilot him kind of akin to the likes of Aphelios, he can be an effective marksman. He tends to spike traditionally in the mid game. If you can get like your 2-item core, and play around that, and he can be effective. Obviously pairs nicely with more specific options in the bot lane. The likes of Sona and Nami are like known ones, but there are other options than just these two. Even like Yumi, for example, is a good Lucian pairing, and you can, if you get through lane, be a very, very strong mid and late game option if you can enable the Yumi to scale. Ashe definitely doing a lot worse at the moment. The changes she received going into 15.1 to hurt her level 1 strength and try and make her weaker as a competitive option. Yeah, hurt her a lot in solo queue. If anything, it hurt her more in solo queue and competitive. I still believe Ashe sees competitive play quite frequently. That being said, though, she is still being played with the Kraken and Kraken variant. I believe Yuntowers can be a competitive option now that they've buffed the item. Obviously, you're still looking at like a PD or a Rune in second, and then you're going like your standard tree. But the champion's just a bit weaker at the moment. Not something I'd really recommend, even if she is a more utility-focused option. Draven Kalista, if you're good at piloting these champions, they are still going to be some of the best options there for you. They are incredibly elite-skewed marksmen. Draven, obviously a very strong, oppressive lane bully, has some of the highest damage in the game, can run you down with an advantage, and be a very effective way of winning games early. Kalista, with the changes going into 50.1, is a stronger marksman. She is better for the average player. Not largely, she's still hard to pilot, and but generally just got better as a pick. I think they lowered her punishment for being slowed, which was nice for her. So Kalista, yeah, sits towards behind the C tier. If you can pilot these champions well, they are very good. Kalista tends to be a bit better in competitive, where you can usually synergize with the specific supports, like your Renatas, for example, which can be a very oppressive laning pair. Xayah moves up to the B tier. She is doing a bit better. She obviously benefited from the LDR buffs that helped her. She will opt into it third and fourth, and yeah, that just gives her a bit more tank killing potential. She is also just doing a bit better at the moment, so I have bumped her from the C tier to the B tier. Jhin should sit towards the high end of the B tier. The buff towards the buff towards Dark Harvest next patch, that's the one, is going to really help him, and I believe Jhin will go back up to the A tier. I don't know if he'll compete for an S tier spot, but the biggest problem with Jhin right now is he is currently playing Fleet Tree. Fleet Tree is aggressively nerfed compared to where it used to be in the past, and he definitely suffers from that. So he sits in the B tier at the moment, but Dark Harvest being buffed next patch, I could definitely see Jhin being a very, very solid option there for you. He's still fine though at the moment, like you can get results. I just think he has a bit less agency than some of the other options here, and some of the hyper carries currently, which are like opting into like Yuntowers, for example. Yasuo also sits within the B tier. It still looks like he's playing Bork over Yuntowers. There's no real like change there. Varus, the Varus is actually relatively comparable to on here at the moment. However, Ginsu Hullbreaker looks like the best way to play Varus. It gives it, like, I believe Ginsu just outright is his best first item option. Top laners seem to have realized it more than bot laners at the moment. If people start opting into Ginsu's more often, I think the champion's A, possibly even S tier for solo queue. He tends to be a bit more elite and competitive bound as a pick, being built around his either long range harass if you're playing lethality, or his pick potential with his ultimate. Requires a bit more setup, and that can definitely be something lacking in solo queue. But lethality is fine here. Like, you can play Youmuu's Varus in solo queue and get results. You can play the on-hit variation. Just having that choice does give him a bit more strength, but I'd really recommend as your core build just trying the Ginsu's Hullbreaker. If you're not a fan of it, then you can still play his other variants, but it's definitely something which looks a very effective at the moment. And with like a Terminus third, you are a very tanky, very high damage on-hit marksman. Plus the attack speed change next patch, 15.3, should probably help him. I believe Varus was one of those champions where you were prohibited building another attack speed option because of the attack speed cap. Now that it's been pushed to 3, I think you can now opt into a third or fourth attack speed option. Whether that is actually correct, it'll be interesting to see. There might just be the case that it just wasn't correct in the first place to opt into more attack speed, and the going to 2.4, 2.5 was about where you wanted to be in the first place. But it'll be interesting to see, definitely. So something to be aware of. Ezreal scales with skill. If you or like piloting with champion, if you can pilot Ezreal well, he is a very good marksman at the moment. If you can't pilot Ezreal well, he tends to struggle a lot more. His DPS is obviously just going to be lower. You're not going to be able to yeah, you're just not going to output the same level of value as someone who pilots the champion well. And that is a big differentiator when it comes to playing Ezreal. So if you're comfortable on him, I'd recommend playing him. If you're not, he's not mandatory. You don't need to play Ezreal, but he is definitely someone who can get you results in the current state of the game. For champions moving up then, we have Twitch, we have Sivir, we have, there are two more, Zeri and Vayne. So Vayne had been doing better for a while. I'd kind of held off on putting her up to be A tier, but she deserves it at this point. The champion does have like some level of variance in builds. We've seen like the standard Borks, we've seen the Trinities for Kraken Slayers, and then like what you build from that can depend on what you need within the game. But she's just doing a bit better at the moment. The buffs were kind of placebo, but just the overall like change to the game going into the new season has helped her, and she's definitely performing a bit better at the moment. Zeri, one of the biggest benefactors of both Yuumi and Yutals being buffed. She is now an A tier marksman, definitely someone I would recommend picking up in her current state. She might start taking over competitive. It's obviously early days, and like as the patch goes on, combined with 15.3, that's where we will like really get the data from. If other marksmen obviously also get nerfed, then Zeri will continue to climb as an option. But yeah, I'd say she sits as an A tier champion. Both in Twitch's case, he's also been doing a bit better at the moment. The champion has got buffed. The Q change was nice. Like people will look at it and laugh as like as it being a buff, but it does help him. It allows him to output more DPS. It makes his level 1 trading stronger. Twitch was already a champion which, if you opened with Q level 1, he could out DPS a lot of champions and just like secure early kills. His roaming and assassin-y playstyle also helps in solo queue a bit more. There's a chance he might opt into, as you know, Halo Blades is being buffed for melee. Never mind, you're probably just going to stick with lethal tempo, and PTI I believe is the other option on him. But yeah, he's doing a bit better at the moment, so he goes up to the A tier. And Sivir, also another champion doing a bit better at the moment. I believe you can opt into Yutals on Sivir and it can be performant. I know Essence Reaver is also a very solid option on her. Static, Kraken, I believe all these are relatively comparative options. Obviously also benefits from LDR being buffed though, so yeah, goes up to the A tier. A lot of the crit marksmen definitely doing a bit better this patch. Some of the AP options are going to be dropping out of the A tier though. The likes of Brand, just not as performant at the moment, does drop down. Ziggs has been weak, has been doing a bit worse for a while. This champion has, the problem with Ziggs is if he's ever really solid within the bot lane, he tends to be a pretty good competitive option, purely because of his range and siege power within the bot lane. Plus, he's like the standard go-to AP option. Swain, obviously going to get buffed in 15.3, but for the moment is doing a bit worse. And then Lux, I'm also going to drop down to the B tier. She's still a solid option here, just not as performant as some of my A tier AP options. The ones that remain are the likes of Karthus, who I still think is a very solid bot lane option, albeit the most unpopular on this list. The champion has definitely faded away over time. He has also received some direct nerfs, which have definitely hurt him a bit. Veigar, very, very good low elo option, does fall off quite aggressively the higher rank you go, but if you can consistently get into late game scenarios, he outputs a huge amount of damage. He can be, and his cage can be very valuable, especially when people don't play around it correctly. I think he's a solid A tier option, especially the lower down you go. Cassiopeia remains within the A tier. She's still very solid. The nerfs just weren't enough. They were it was a nerf to Cassiopeia in winning situations, not like just a general nerf. The patch, the change in 15.3 is going to be 2 AP ratio nerfs, one to the Q, one to the W, and that'll probably end up tapping her down, maybe enough to like drop her popularity to the point where it's not even worth having her included here. But for the moment, she is very strong, and she is more popular than some of the options here, so Cassiopeia going to remain as an A tier option. The other one remaining is Seraphine, and then actually I've got 2 more to add to the A tier. So Seraphine, still very solid, like a lower damage option, more utility, like has CC on the E, CC on the ult, and has the utility of the W. good wave clear. She's a bit of a jack of all trades. She's not gonna, you're gonna be able to pick her because of just her like options and what she can provide. There are better champions which excel in different fields, but she is a solid AP option within the bot lane. Mel going to be added to the A tier. It looks to be about evenly performant, if anything more performant in the bot lane at the moment, as are some, like, a decent chunk of mages which have like access to range and can harass the ADCs, which tend to traditionally have lower MR. She just performs a bit better here at the moment. So even with the hotfix nerf, I think she sits as an A tier champion. She'll probably climb win rate wise and just like comfort and build wise, like over the patches. So she might end up getting nerfed again. It'll be interesting to see where like Riot have perceived her to land and like what kind of skill ceiling barrier to entry she has as a champion. But she doesn't look too challenging to play, so I think she, could definitely work as an A tier bot laner, especially if you are comfortable on that style of champion. Victor is going to move down from the A tier. He obviously received a tap down this patch, and that does hurt him. He loses access to a bit of damage on the Q trading and the ult trading. It's mostly focused towards the late game, but he'd already been hotfix nerfed, and I've dropped him down to the A tier now. The other champions which remain in the A tier are the likes of Nyla, Corki, and actually Nyla, Corki, Caitlyn, and Kog'Maw. I still think all of these options are very good. Like Caitlyn with her range, her siege potential, her damage later on to the game can be very oppressive. Nyla with the right pairings, very strong. Same goes for Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw doesn't really go the AP variant anymore. You're mostly prohibited to be on here, and that does tag him down a bit, so I could definitely see him like being a lower E tier option. And then Corki, obviously very strong early game stat checky marksman with very solid wave clear. It can make him a really hard champion to ever like siege against or fight against, especially early on. He's like Draven, except from he's considerably easier to play, so definitely a champion I'd recommend picking up if you like early game bullies. And then my S tier is going to consist of two champions, that is Hui and Jinx. In Hui's case, he is an incredibly good bot laner, has been for a very long time. People are, I'd say, aware of this at this point. He is a very good mid laner in his current state as well. Definitely a champion I'd recommend people learn, especially if you're looking for a bit more unique AP option within the bot lane. Jinx benefited from the Yuntal buffs. She was already a relatively performant marksman. Definitely a champion I would recommend playing, especially with MF being nerfed next patch, who is probably the premier marksman at the moment. Definitely someone I would recommend learning over the remainder of this patch. Going into the next patch, she'll probably, like, my presumption would be she would get nerfed in 15.4, but obviously that's a while away, and it's definitely a good time to be playing Jinx. And then MF stands as the number one ADC. She was performing really well last patch. They didn't nerf her, and I mean that was what they chose to do, so she stays performant. Other champions shifted about, some got better, some got worse, but she stays as the S plus option. She goes traditionally the first strike, lethality variant with like your Yomus and your Collector, but she can also play BT with PTA or BT with first. Like there are different ways you can play MF. She is not locked to a single build variation. It comes down to what you need within the game. What do you want to have access to? And she's in a very good spot. Also benefiting from Rel being really strong at the moment. That is a very strong pairing. So Rel being nerfed will obviously have some level of impact on MF. She is also being directly nerfed. I imagine that will tag her down a bit. Whether she'll drop down or drop all the way down to the A tier, it'll be interesting to see. But at the moment, she is my premier marksman, the champion I would recommend playing at the moment. She is also relatively easy to play. So great for climbing. Play MF and you should be good to go. That is my 15.2 ADC tier list video. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.